I will do my best to be as clear and open as possible in relation to all this. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Josh, and today I'm going to give just a quick 20-minute presentation on data protection and COVID. What are my responsibilities? What are your responsibilities as a business? So today's presentation will cover a little bit about Mushroom, who we are, just a nod to the challenges that I can appreciate all of you are currently facing in light of COVID, and an outline on sort of the regulatory approach taken by the Information Commissioner's Office, which is the statutory body responsible for data protection in the United Kingdom. A little bit about what companies must do if they're looking to test their employees or monitor those employees when they're working from home. And then finally, a bit of the admin, which no doubt I'm sure all of you can appreciate. GDPR has been somewhat of an admin and headache for many businesses, trying to get their head wrapped around what's expected of them and what they're expected to do. So I'll just give you a little brief idea about the sort of documents and policies that you need to have to ensure that you're meeting your responsibilities. A little bit about me. My name's Josh, obviously. I am a certified information privacy professional for Europe. I'm the data protection officer for the TLAM group, which I'll explain in a little bit. But for the purpose of today's presentation, I am a paralegal providing compliance and assistance to multiple clients across the Mushroom client base. So what is Mushroom? Mushroom provides all of the following services you will see on the screen: HR, GDPR, virtual assistant, company secretarial, legals, bookkeeping, credit control, business consulting. It's interesting because when I try and explain Mushroom to people, it can be quite difficult, but the key message is we make people time. I think we can all agree everything on the right-hand side of your screen takes up your time, and it can be irritating and annoying, and it's not what you want to do with your business. You want to focus on growing your business, expanding and selling your products and services, not having to deal with the books or the compliance or the GDPR elements. I also like to say that Mushroom, one of the key things about us is our expertise and the specialism across the various different service streams. You get an integrated product. So if you need anything, you don't need to go to a lawyer or to go to an accountant or to go to an HR specialist. You come to one place and we provide an overall cost-effective solution. Mushroom's part of a wider group of families, a wider family of companies. These include the TLAM, which provides legal outsourced services. Mushroom, as you'll see there. Lexco Systems is a little bit of our blockchain, so we do a bit of blockchain work. TLAM Pay, which is our payment application to help you get your clients to pay their bills. You basically send them a text message and they can pay over the phone. And again, Mushroom provides these services, and yeah, we, as a testament to the sort of people business we are, we're a people's business. We have pretty good reviews on Trustpilot. I'm going to be talking about GDPR, and if any of you have had interaction with GDPR and had to deal with it in your day-to-day business, you'll have come across a fair few concepts and terms that it's crucial for you to understand in order to appreciate what you need to do, what's expected of you. The first is a controller. The legislation, the GDPR, and including the Data Protection Act of 2018, provides that a controller is the natural or legal person, public authority or agency, which either jointly or alone determines the purposes and the means of the processing of personal data. That's great, but what that actually means, it doesn't explain it. So purposes, the way we like to think about it, is the what and the why. the purpose of processing data. What are you collecting? What data is it that you're collecting? Names, contact emails, email addresses, phone numbers, and why are you collecting that data? What is your legal basis? Is it that you're performing a contract with them? Is it that you have that person's consent? Is it perhaps in your legitimate interest as a business to have those contact details? The means is more towards the technical and organizational measures. Well, how do we collect that data? Is it through paper? Is it through email addresses? Is it through our CRM? And the when do we get that data? When is the point at which we collect that information? And how long do we store it for? By necessary implication, another term is a processor. A processor is the person or legal agency or individual that determines, in line with what the controller tells them to do. Oh, that's a bit complicated. Essentially, the controller is the one who dictates to the processor what needs to be done. In your scenarios, perhaps as a business, you are the controller in that you provide services and you decide what is done with the data. But if you need to use another company, such as perhaps Sankara's Microsoft services, they are a processor of that information. They will use that information according to what you tell them to do with it. It is fairly ambiguous at times, and it can be very difficult for an organization to identify, am I a controller of the information or am I a processor? This is just a very short picture on the sort of principles, because if you take one thing from this presentation, is that GDPR and data protection is mainly principle based. GDPR and data protection and how we use information, it's not that you can't do it. The legislation doesn't prevent you from using people's information. It's a misnomer to think I can't use people's data. You can, provided you are in strict accordance with certain principles. Use it fairly. If you collect information for a certain reason, use it only for that reason. If you collect the data, it needs to be accurate. If you collect the data, you need to make sure it's secure. And finally, the length for which you keep it needs to be a certain period. You can't collect information on a database and then have it for indefinitely. That's particularly what GDPR is trying to avoid. So COVID, obviously we know, we can all agree that businesses are struggling due to the external macroeconomic effects that cause stress, anxiety for businesses and individuals alike. And data protection and COVID are linked, because data protection rules and the responsibilities that are required on you don't stop necessarily since that there's a crisis. They continue, and if in any event they could be seen as more important because people are now working from home, because there's social distancing measures. We need to be careful about what we do with people's information. I'm sure most of you will have seen the contact tracing aspects of this, where the government is looking to have individuals track and traced if they are found to have symptoms of COVID. Obviously, we have the Google and Android version. We also have the Apple iPhone version. I'm sure if maybe some of you won't know, but if you go into your iPhone at the moment and you go to your health settings, the app is, well, the technical measures are actually already on your device. So it's all set up and ready. It just hasn't been implemented yet. I would like to stress, however, that it's not active. So we hope that the government isn't actively collecting our information at the moment, but the technical measures needed to do so are in place. There's a difference between the centralized and decentralized models. The UK itself has opted for a centralized model where all the information gets sent to a big central database that the government can administer, whereas the decentralized model is following a European approach, and that's where the data itself is stored specifically on the individual's device. It's not that any of their personal information is then sent to a database. And of course, there's some difficulties at the moment where the government is facing a large amount of flack from Google and Apple with how the system actually works. So it's not in place as yet, but it will come to be very important. Probably all of us agree that we need a drink in times like this. And one of the recent things that have been introduced is that pubs, restaurants, and businesses will need to collect customers' information and keep it for 21 days. This is in England only, and Wales and Scotland will obviously release guidance in due course. But for people, that's quite scary. If I go to the pub for a drink, I don't necessarily want to have to give you my name and my contact details, and I can completely appreciate it if people are worried about this. Perhaps the best way to explain this whole thing is that it's guidance. It's not law that you need to give your information to the pub or the restaurant. You don't have to. It's guidance that's people are expected to follow, but you're not going to be fined or put in a position where you'll be in trouble if you simply don't feel like you want to share your information. It is your right under data protection legislation. Coupled with this, however, and particularly in light of why people would be scared, are the nefarious motives attached to giving companies your data. I saw a recent article where a lady, and let's be honest, it will be a woman that are affected more, perhaps so, in this respect, in giving data up, is that one of the publican's employees took that data and then messaged her on Facebook and wanted to ask her out on a date because he'd seen her in the pub a couple of times and he'd met her on Tinder and he was scared to speak to her. So it is quite creepy and leaves a bad taste in our mouths as to what companies will be doing with our data. So you can completely appreciate why people would be scared. The best way to explain it is, if the company or the pub or the restaurant's going to be using your data, they need to follow certain principles. They need to be accountable for what they're doing with your data. They don't need to collect so much. They don't need copious amounts of information. Perhaps a top tip is, if you're going in a group of people, have a defined lead and have that person give their contact details rather than having 6 or 7 people giving all their details. But also, when they take your information, ask the pub or the restaurant where the information will be kept, will it be secure, and who will have access to it. That you are entitled as a data subject under the legislation to have access to this information. And if they don't provide you with a suitable answer, don't give them your information. It's as simple as that. Perhaps it's also good, it's a bit of a marketing ploy, but myths surrounding personal data. We don't process, as your business, you don't process personal data. And from experience, I can tell you that is nonsense. Most, if not all, businesses process personal data. If we consider the broad definition of personal data under the legislation, personal data under GDPR and the DPA is defined as, I'm paraphrasing here, but by reference to any identifier, whether an identified or identifier individual in comparison to an online identification. So any form of information, whether it could even be an invoice, if you can match that invoice with that customer, it's considered personal data. Another thing, GDPR and DP laws prevent you from using data. No, nonsense. Again, you must report every single breach. If you suffer a personal data breach, you must report it. And if you don't, you're going to be fined massively. Again, nonsense. You only need to report things where there is a risk to the fundamental rights and freedoms of the individual. In addition, the ICO has submitted guidance that in the event they decide to fine you, it's not going to be every case. They don't take this broad brush approach that, oh, we must just fine all businesses, because that's not what the ICO is there to do. It's to make sure you remain compliant and uphold high standards. But in the event you are found to have been sloppy with how you hold your information, if you don't password protect things, if you don't encrypt your information, if you leave your PCs unattended with no passwords, then I can say that yes, you will be subject to a fine. But other than that, if you do everything that is reasonable within your power, you shouldn't have an issue. a top tip for my own practice, because I deal with a lot of solicitors, mortgage brokers, and companies across a wide variety of sectors. Encrypt your files and password protect any document that contains personal data when you send it out. It can be password protected with as simple as the name of the client or whatever you're dealing with. If it's an invoice, use a password that's easy to remember, but at least only that individual who's required to have access to that information will be able to ascertain it. The added benefit of this is, God forbid you send an information out to the wrong people, the file's encrypted and password protected, so that individual can't access it. So you therefore don't need to report it to the ICO because you've suitably reduced the risk to individuals. Another myth is that you need consent. Nonsense. Consent merely one ground for processing data, particularly regarding legitimate interests if you're going to be collecting individuals' contact details. But of course, you must complete a legitimate impact assessment and have that attached to any of your collection details. If the ICO comes in and wants to know, okay, you said you had a legitimate interest in collecting this information, do you have a legitimate interest assessment, an LAI, on hand? Most companies don't, and it's a bit of an administrative headache, but it's important to have those documents in place. The ICO's regulatory approach, this is in line of COVID, and okay, what's happening? They know that budgets are stretched and people are struggling. They understand that it's a public health emergency and it has had impacts on the way people deal with their business, with their clients, and with their data. They recognize this. They're going to take that into account when they consider any actions. This, obviously, by necessary implication, results in fewer investigations. They're only going to look where there's serious non-compliance, as I alerted to earlier. It's only when there's serious issues will they look to investigate you. Of course, you're still required to report things within 72 hours, subject to the caveat that I said earlier. In light of the economic impacts, when they're looking to fine you, they're going to take into account your affordability and the impact that COVID has had on your business. It's likely to mean that there's going to be, the fines will reduce. So yes, okay, you might be subject to a fine, but it's going to be suitably reduced. Monitoring employees, probably the main thing here. What we're looking at, the temperature testing of people and monitoring individuals when they're in the workplace. If I can tell you from experience of the work that I've been doing for my own clients, it's an absolute minefield. If you're going to be temperature testing, the ICO hasn't strictly said that it's all right and okay. Any testing that is done, of course, must be done in accordance with the accountability principle I spoke about in the beginning of the presentation. You need to be accountable for what you're doing with that person's information. Bearing in mind, and this is probably where Maisie and Darren are probably aware of this, health data is special category data. This means, in terms of GDPR and the Data Protection Act, you need a lawful basis, first of all, which is probably going to be a legitimate interest, but you also need a condition for processing, which is under Article 9.2, along with a Schedule 1 condition of the DPA. And basically, it requires a lot of thought. It requires you to consider carefully what you're doing with the information, and not least, particularly in light of the special category, if we're looking at what the contact tracing and the data that's going to be used for contact tracing, when we're sharing that with public authorities, we need to obviously check that if the public authority asks, hey, please can I see the information you're collecting on your employees in light of COVID, you need to check that it is not a scam and it is actual public authority that's looking for the data. But also you need a policy document. You need a document that explains how you're going to be using the data, what data you're going to be collecting, how long you're going to store it, and your reasoning for why you believe it is important to collect this information. My advice, maybe in as much as it can be transparent. If you're going to be doing it, the law doesn't say you can't use it, but you need to be transparent with your employees about how that you're using their information. Document your decisions. conduct a data protection impact assessment and share that with the ICO if you're going to be looking at monitoring your employees. It's not only required by the legislation, it's good business practice, and it helps tick the so-called boxes that businesses must be alerted to if they're going to be conducting these sort of activities. Another thing, we're probably all working from home at the moment. We need to remind the employees, and even if you're a small business with it's just a one-man band, you need to be important about your obligations to protect the data that you use. You need to have data protection policies in place. You need to have working from home policies for your staff so that the staff are aware of what's expected of them, how they are to use the information. Just because you're not in the office doesn't mean that you can have a less level of protection. You still need to make sure you do your bit. Housekeeping, we need policies, procedures, and granular privacy policies as a standard, but those need to be reviewed every year. Don't do these policies and put it in a box and forget about it. That's not what GDPR is about. It's a constant, ongoing effort to demonstrate compliance. You can create data maps if you're not at that stage where you know and have these documents in place. Create a data map. Use either a whiteboard marker or perhaps even Lucidchart. It's a free processing data mapping tool. Map out the journey of how the data is used. When do you get it? What do you do with it? Where does it go? And draw out a picture on how you're going to be using the information. That will give you suitable understanding of your business's processing activities. Yeah, I highly doubt many of you will have more than 250 employees, but if you do, you need to document your processing activities under Article 30. Keep your records up to date. Obviously, we need the information to be accurate. Not only is it difficult from a sales perspective if you don't have the correct contact details, but it's required by the legislation to have your information that you collect accurate. Ensure you have DPIAs, LAAs, DSARs, and data breach response templates ready. Have these documents at the ready. Even if you're not going to use them at the moment, it's important for you to have these documents in place so that when you do decide to conduct certain data activities concerning personal data, you've got the templates and it's ready, and you can, just conduct the assessments. Again, if you need help, Mushroom obviously can help with any of those. In summary, how do I protect my business? Data protection doesn't prevent you from using data. And COVID-19, it's difficult and it's brought challenges to business, but data protection doesn't just stop. The way to use information must be transparent. The best way to think of it is that we need to have processes, policies, and procedures in place to manage the risks when we deal with people's data. Review your policies annually, train your staff if you have them, and see data protection as an opportunity, but document your expectations, obviously. And obviously, again, if you need any help, the team at mushroombiz.co.uk or Josh at mushroombiz.co.uk, I can help with all of this, any of these aspects. And yeah, alternatively, go to Mushroom Biz. I'm going to be sending out these slides, and you can contact us on the contact page, explain a bit more about what you need. Again, if any of you guys need accounting help, HR help, health and safety, risk assessments, we can do the full range of it. But primarily for this presentation, if you're confused, or if you want just a quick call to check, have I got everything in place? Am I good? Is there anything more I should be doing? Give me a call or email me. I'm happy to help, very much so. Thanks for your time, guys. Any questions?
Perfect. Thanks, Josh. That was really useful. I hope everyone found that really useful as well. If anyone does have any questions, I encourage you to put them in the chat box. We've literally got 1 minute left.
Oh, better be quick.
Yeah, better type quick. Just wait whilst if anyone is typing, I'm just going to go over the next networking event then. So the next event will take place on Wednesday, not Thursday next week. So that's the 22nd of July, 12 till 1, and it's lunchtime networking and breakout rooms. So similar to what we did earlier. Don't think anyone has any questions, do they? Oh, we have got one question actually from Christoph.
Yes, Christoph, contacts in Outlook, if it's a name, a surname, email address, it's considered personal data under GDPR and the Data Protection Act. So you will need to, GDPR applies. The best way to think about this, guys, is if you have any sort of information regarding an individual, GDPR applies, and then we can work on the basis of, okay, maybe it doesn't. Work on the basis that it applies as a standard, and then we'll look to see how we can actually say, no, it doesn't apply. But as an initial point, consider GDPR to apply in all cases when you're considering personal data. Again, I've put